Before the video begins, special thanks to Mythic Art and Momo Tsuko for the amazing Persona X Fallout art. Please check out their work and show them some love. But now, let's get to the video, everyone. Hello everyone, welcome back to the theater. Today we're speaking about the cancelled Project Van Buren by Black Isle Studio. This was supposed to be Fallout 3, but without further ado, Drive Me Crazy, take it away.
Hey everybody, Drive Me Crazy here. So I'm going to be providing just a bit of background information as to how I came across these materials for Fallout 3 Van Buren. I was actually looking for some beta content and I had come across a different looking Fallout 3. So I began to ask my co-hosts, Epic and Ann, wasn't Black Isle the people who owned Fallout before they sold the rights to Bethesda? And they'd respond with, yes, what did you find? And I explained to them what I found and we had downloaded it, and seemingly finding the 2003 Fallout 3 Van Buren tech demo. And as a quick disclaimer, any media that is shown off here and talked about will not be distributed in any way, shape, or form or manner. By the way, if you want to get in contact with us or see what we're creating next, join our Discord. We can't wait to see you all there. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, go grab yourself a snack, a drink, whatever, go lay down, get comfortable, and get ready to dive into the deepest and darkest pits of Fallout Lost Media.
Before we begin, a little history on Project Van Buren. This project was going to include multiplayer, and an option to play either turn-based combat like previous Fallout games, or real-time much like Tactics and Fallout 3 onwards. Now, the real-time was a demand by Interplay, and a solution by Black Isle to meet expectations of the new fans they gained from Tactics and Brotherhood of Steel. And presumably, when beginning a multiplayer session, the host would select what style to use. Now, that sounds a little wacky to you. Don't worry, you're not the only one. The tech demo comes out of the box with the real-time combat system in use, and while it's not bad, it's not great either, and feels like a half-assed solution to retain the AP meter needed for the turn-based system. And it doesn't really flow with the way the UI is laid out. But besides that, the tech demo isn't really anything to write home about alone. And honestly, besides the bugs, it's basically just like Fallout 1 or 2. Now, the only things we're able to see in this tech demo are power armor and leather armor, cattle prod, combat knives, and a flamer that sounds like an object stuck in a wall. And that's really it in terms of armor and weapons, and the game informs us we're supposed to be heading for a vault. This section seems to be taking mere moments after the nukes began falling, since the foes we face here are described as commies by the power armor-clad soldier, who self-describes himself as a soldier of the Midwest Commonwealth. But aside from the bare-bone tech demo, that's all the gameplay we have of Van Buren, period. But we were able to decompile the demo, and it has a treasure trove of information for us to look at. So let's begin looking at the critters folder. A great deal of the normal Fallout fare would have been included in the game, although there are some bizarre inclusions. Cows, cougars, and normal bugs. Now this wouldn't be odd, but these are just the normal animals with no mutations or oddities or anything else. We never see anything like this in the other Fallout games. Every single creature we see is either some specimen of mutation, or seems to be derived from some spliced up creature of its origin. And on that front, we have some of those creatures. Ants and acarines were planned for Van Buren, with another fuck-off big bug called Desert Stalkers, which are massive antlions. But moving back to the more normal Fallout creatures we see, giant gila monsters were planned, along with a host of plant-based creatures to fight with. The strangest of them being a weedling, which would have been some kind of bipedal plant monster. You know, I think it's probably a good time to talk about what the hell you'd use to get these creatures off your back.
We'll begin the section with the scrapped energy weapons of Van Buren. Within the files, we saw mention of the Artemis railgun, and a little digging elsewhere, we were able to figure out you can spawn in the assets of the guns. So here's what the rifle would have looked like. It would have been a shoulder-fired weapon akin to the shoulder-mounted machine guns from Lonesome Road. It would have taken 15mm EC. Nothing like this has ever appeared outside of Van Buren, and the weapon was unfinished, much like the Apollo laser gun, which by its lore was an advanced design being developed by Poseidon Energy. For the next energy weapon, we have the Laser Array Rifle, which bear a shocking resemblance to the Laser RCW from New Vegas, which might tell us this was an automatic laser rifle. To end off, we have the Arc Welder. Not the big one from Lonesome Road, but this small blowtorch looking thing. For ballistic fans, since Van Buren had a number of options: classic sawed-off shotguns, 9mm pistols, and the 223 pistol from Fallout 1 and 2. With a few weapons we haven't seen, the 45 pistol set would have included a revolver, which bears a close resemblance to the police revolver from Dead Money, as well as the 50 caliber revolver, which looks like it was based off the Smith & Wesson 500 Magnum, so it might have occupied a similar role to the hunting revolver from New Vegas. The last gun we have seen in Fallout New Vegas, that being the 9mm SMG, but in Van Buren, it's based off of the MAC-10, and its extended mag and suppressor are loosely based off the real things one could have bought for the MAC-10. Now bear in mind, all this is in the tech demo, just hidden behind the console commands, so this should tell us Van Buren might have been quite complete in terms of baseline gameplay. Let's see how complete the game was in terms of lore and locations.
Hey guys, Drive Me Crazy here, coming to interrupt the video just this once. I'm coming here to say that this video took a lot of dedication, time, and research, so if you're enjoying what you're seeing so far, we would appreciate it so much if you liked the video and subscribed. But with this being said, let's get back into the video.
Before the section begins, viewer discretion is advised. We will be discussing sexual harassment, rape, and unethical experiments, plus more. You have been warned. If you are uncomfortable with any of that, please skip the next section. To be clear, we'll be discussing what was in the design documents. This game was still being actively worked on before the plug was pulled, so what we mentioned here may not have been the final version that was intended. With that said, what do we have? To begin, the design documents mention that the NCR and Brotherhood are at war, and many outlying settlements or locations with ties to the NCR don't know or are under attack by the Brotherhood of Steel, with it even going as far as the NCR Congress building being blown up by Brotherhood of Steel saboteurs. So a massive part of the game would have been navigating the divide between the NCR and its foes. As for us, the player, we would have begun as prisoners within a location called Leavenworth, which would have led us to escaping to the Wasteland, but the documents that mention this would lead to a horrific holocaust befalling the Wasteland. As far as we know, this is referring to the fact that the player is infected with the new plague. Now, to caution this, all the design documents we have say nothing about the player being infected, but the Boulder document more or less confirms it with the way it's laid out. As for the general story, the player is being hunted down by the caretakers, and eventually the player would have discovered that they are infected with the new plague and need to find a cure, bringing back the timed panic from 1 and 2. Now, where would the player go? Boulder, which would lead them to Dr. Presper. Now, to make this long story short, Presper is on a mission to save the world from the new plague by nuking it back into nothing to get rid of the new plague. Not exactly the goal. He's trying to develop a cure, but believes that nuking the world will help buy him time. Honestly, the fact that the new plague survived the first nuke would be indication that that is a dumb idea, but anyhow. Now, as far as everything is concerned, that's not the awful part, it's just the main story. So, with full context as well, the player heading to any location will lead to the PC interacting with them, and thus spreading the new plague further. And based on what's loosely said in the design documents, it's a big issue because this was a deadly virus in the old Americana. But, you know, just to be fully blunt here, as we read through the design documents, we were getting exhausted by the overbearing nature of it all. And as attested to by interviews with the developers during the game's development, this game was going to have far fewer jokes and was going to be more of a Fallout 1 style experience, which I personally think was a massive mistake. Fallout 1 is, you know, great, but I think the thing that's made Fallout so iconic is that it's one of the few post-apocalypses that just juggles both dark story and the stupid adventures perfectly. You know, just for an example, the main story of New Vegas is a really deep story that deals with so many heavy topics, especially some of the side quests, but there's also really dumb ones like Nothing But a Hound Dog. I think Black Isles was just wrong in this case. So I think the main reason Fallout has remained so popular and memorable is the light tone is able to put on, in contrast to the dark environment you wander in. But before I continue, this will be the last chance you have to skip this section. Please, seriously, I'm not joking around. You have been warned. Now, I don't think it's impossible to talk about dark topics like rape or the like. I'm going to be fully honest here. I think there are some lines you should draw on how you go about including that stuff. Where am I going with this? In Denver, you encounter a group of scavengers who is written in the documents word for word, they will go crazy over any women they see. Yeah, so if you're playing as a female character, there is an encounter where the scavengers will rape your character. I'm just gonna move on because I flatly see zero reason to linger here. On the awful experiment side of things, there's a location called the Reservation, and to cut a long story short, it's a ghoul haven that has a ghoul cult that seeks to kill all smoothskins, as they believe ghouls are the superior life form and the natural evolution humans should take. And they have figured out a method to birth natural, quote-unquote, ghouls, which works on men and women. I have zero clue why the design document uses this language, but that's not the worst part. There is a born female ghoul called Belle, and a ugly PC can have sex with her. Now, you say two facts. One, Belle comes onto the player really hard if they have low charisma. And I don't want to say it's sexual harassment, but especially if the player doesn't want it, it can really come like that. Two, at the time the game is taking place, biologically speaking, Belle is 2 fucking years old. The document tries to justify this by saying that born ghouls grow up fast. I'm going to say flatly, I think we all can get what I'm getting at here. This is disgusting in every single right. I'm going to keep on going just to kind of get you all to understand why I'm so disgusted with this particularly. The document goes on to describe her as, without her lesions and symmetrically exposed bone, she'd be a very pretty, albeit pale woman. Then goes on to describe her as curvy and, you know, to skip over the obvious borderline necrophilia stuff, because New Vegas also includes it to a degree with Beatrix and the Wang Bang Atomic Wrangler quest. I think the difference here is with the fact that Belle is 2 years old, and more uncomfortably, if the player goes through with it, he gets pregnant, and you're infected with a new plague, which is just another whack-ass thing to include on top of this. Now to focus on the problem with it, is that I just feel this location's stupid because the ghouls are just fucking awful. You are given zero reason to think that ghouls are victims of abuse, gang harassment for no reason. You are given zero reason to think that because the reservation just has awful treatment. They take slaves and treat them like garbage. Like, it's not a bridge too far to say that you would get a better experience in a Soviet gulag than, you know, random ones get pulled away to get experimented on, to birth fucking ghouls, which only has a 2% chance of working. And, you know, just to stop here, I think the obvious biggest issue here is that you're given zero reason to think the wasteland is savable. Even the good locations are either destroyed or low morale because of situations around them or the NCR Brotherhood War, which I guess you can say is a stylistic choice, but I feel when the two main ending options are to save this fucked world and nuke it again, most players won't think twice about the loss of life, and as a player, we're given zero reason to see the wasteland as a place that's rebuilding and more of a place that's just collapsing because of others. I want to pick sides here, but I think moving in the direction of America rebuilding is significantly more interesting than basically dooming the wasteland to a new apocalypse, or maybe an incurable plague. And, you know, I'm just gonna say flatly, I think it's probably a good time here to see what ideas from Van Buren made it into future Fallout games, because I think that's quite a bit more interesting than this slog.
The Fallout 3 we got was very different, but still has a great deal of elements of Van Buren's story within it, so let's check them out. The concept of the BOS going to war with another faction is still well and alive in Fallout 3, and even the idea of the nukes made it into broken steel, as well from the Point Lookout. We are unable to uncover information about the new plague, but it's more of a minor domino in the misfortunes of Maryland rather than the world-ending threat presented in Van Buren. And finally, Mothership Zeta and Operation Anchorage gives us a glimpse of pre-war America through the eyes of Elliot and the propaganda that was fed to US troops post-Anchorage. Ultimately, I feel a number of concepts and ideas that Van Buren featured or wanted to touch on were more or less covered in Fallout 3, even going on as far to touch on the communist insurgents that were minorly featured in the opening of the game. Within New Vegas, we got most of the people's ideas, concepts that Van Buren was going to feature. We won't go over everything, but to rapid fire a few things first. The Van Graffs, Crimson Caravan, Hoover Dam, Powder Gangers, the Legion, Followers of the Apocalypse, Arcade Ganon, Rex. Now everything that we just mentioned there is stuff that we won't cover because either there's no change, or it can be on its own video to compare what changed. To begin, the main game doesn't have a ton of examples of ideas that were for Van Buren. Within the DLCs, we can get examples of ideas that originated in Van Buren. In Honest Hearts, we hear the new Canaanites, which have been destroyed by the White Legs, which is similar to Van Buren, where it was destroyed by the refugees. As for Graham and Daniel, Graham's story has remained unchanged. As for Daniel, he has no comparable character in Van Buren. The Big MT was mentioned in Van Buren, although we have very little clue what it was for, although it's easy to assume that it was some kind of prison facility operating in the wasteland, so quite a bit different from what we got in New Vegas. As for Dead Money and Lonesome Road, they don't have any direct connections to Van Buren aside from theming and general vibe, and that's really all the content that made it into the other games that we can 100% connect without taking a leap in logic. So now we should discuss.
Was Van Buren the success that Black Isle Studios needed to stay afloat? The answer, most likely not. Based on reception of Brotherhood of Steel and Tactics, there was a massive drop in people who liked Fallout, and what was worse is that Van Buren was going to be taking itself super seriously instead of letting the dumb fun stuff coexist with the darker tone of the main story. As mentioned before, the player is given zero reason to care about the wasteland at all. Now, we come to a all too familiar problem. A villain that has zero motive and just starts conflict to start conflict. I feel as Presper would have been received about as well as Fallout 4's Institute. Just a confused bag of nonsense with a plan that doesn't make a ton of sense. Would the game have been fun? Maybe. It would have been the first multiplayer Fallout game, but that doesn't mean it would have been a good game. To take Fallout 76 as an example, these games can start out rough, but over time smooth into a gem that was rough. But with the conflicting player base that Black Isle Studios was gunning for, I don't believe this was a good idea. While in concept it works, the reality is that this would have been super boring for new players playing the turn-based, or worse, too fast for the newbies playing real time. And what is the worst realization? Is that if one was better than the other, there would be zero reason to use the other method of combat. Now, with all said and done, I don't like insulting someone else's work, but I can say with a great deal of certainty, Van Buren was going to flop. With a clear divide in fan base, Black Isle Studios was in a terrible situation, and I feel that there was no game they could have produced that could have saved them, or worse, that wouldn't permanently tarnish the perception of Fallout. I think the reason modern Fallout works is the perfect balance, and it strikes between the dark and the light side of its world. To this day, my favorite game is Fallout New Vegas, and I adore how it handles the dark subject matter while having an air of comedy, and I, for one, am grateful that we still have Fallout. With it all being said and done, have a good day, everyone. This has been the last show of the day. Till next time, this has been the Theater of Creators, signing off.